Mm-hmm.
Claire.
Yes.
Simone is going to be acting as the moderator for the entire immigration panel.
Okay.
We have been talking this morning, and
Okay.
we decided that that would be a cleaner, easier way to make the issue easier to discuss.
Okay. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Greetings and salutations. You are live with us at the Caribbean American Heritage Month celebrations. What? This is day number 22 of our marathon, 30-day marathon. And we are delighted that we continue to hang together as we gather to look at issues and at options that affect our future. So, for those of you who are joining us for the first time, we note that this morning we began with the census. This is the 22nd annual convening of Caribbean American Legislative Week. We began back in 1999 when I weighed 99 pounds less, and I also could walk 99 minutes longer. So it's been a long time coming, and we're so grateful that we managed to stay the course so that we could be gathering today in a time such as this to talk about issues and challenges and opportunities that face our community. So this morning we went through census, and of course we have to count who we are. If Black Lives Matter, then certainly we must matter enough to count ourselves in. And we're moving to the second piece of our, let's say, domestic agenda, which is immigration. The rest of the week will be focused largely on the U.S. foreign policy agenda as per the demands of HR 4939, Public Law 114291, which looks at including diaspora in the deliberations of the U.S. State Department, and ICS is convening consulting partner with the State Department. So we're looking at all those things from tomorrow. But today we thought we'd look at immigration as it continues to be an area of concern for many in our community, both those who are here as immigrants and those who are here as non-immigrants, some of whom were caught up in the COVID pandemic and unable to travel either forward or backward. So we have with us a distinguished panel, which should be under the guide stewardship, if you will, of Simone Williams, one of our longtime friends, as well as Myrtle Robinson, another longtime friend and colleague of ICS. And we just hope that you are benefit. Please spread the word. If you're watching, I'm going to start a watch party soon. So please spread the word so people are able to follow on your own Facebook pages. We want to make sure that you get all the information. Now's the time to ask questions because these ladies are on top of it. Trust me. Every possible form of visa you know about, they know about it. So you're going to get it from the horse's mouth. And our discussants and our panelists know also some of the legal wranglings and judicial wranglings and Supreme Court wranglings that might come up in the discussion. So without further ado, I'd like to turn the floor over to Simone Williams Esquire, who is based here in Washington, D.C. in her immigration practice. Over to you, Simone.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We have a very exciting and informative panel and some expert guests to discuss the current immigration issues. I would like to formally introduce everyone first, actually get them to say a little bit about themselves, makes it a little bit easier. We first have Alan Orr, who's founder of Orr Immigration Law. Alan, do you want to talk about yourself a little bit, explain your background?
Sure. I'm also a business immigration attorney in the Washington, D.C. area. I am the president-elect for the National Immigration Bar Association, and I've worked on immigration for the last 20 years.
Thank you, Alan. Sheldon Smith?
Yeah, good morning, good afternoon. Sorry if the lighting is so bad in my connection, but yeah, my name is Sheldon Smith. I've practiced immigration with the federal government since 2012, so the last 8 years. I've done a couple other things in the interim, but primarily focused on family-based immigration issues.
Thank you, Sheldon. Myrtle Robinson.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Myrtle Robinson. I have an immigration practice. It's based out of Greenbelt, Maryland, which is just outside of Washington, D.C. We provide immigration guidance and counsel to business and families seeking to come to the U.S. I've been doing this for about 25 years. I graduated from Howard Law, and I've been practicing immigration ever since.
Thank you, Myrtle. And the last panelist that we have is Carmita Albaris, who will be discussing the deportation issues. Carmita, can you provide us with a little bit of your background?
Worker?
Yeah, there we are. We could hear you.
Okay, yes, I'm a forensic social worker. I have been working within the criminal justice system for the past 31 years, primarily, dealing with issues of death penalty mitigation. And in the line of the work that I've been doing, I recognize, certain challenges that our immigrant population faces. And so I started an organization in 2002, I'm sorry, Family Unification Resettlement Initiative, where I assist individuals, or my office in Jamaica assists individuals who have been deported. So that's, my contribution as far as this, panel is concerned.
Okay, thank you so much, Carmita. So just a little bit of background about myself. I am founder of Williams Global Law based here in Washington, DC. We assist foreign employees, entrepreneurs, and businesses with a host of business immigration issues, and as well as family immigration issues. I am a board member of the DC Chamber of Commerce, and also the commissioner of the Mayor's Advisory Commission on Caribbean Affairs. So I'm very excited to talk to you guys about the different immigration issues. There's so many things going on right now. There's COVID-19, there's Trump administration with their immigration bans, and I mean, there's so many things going on as an immigration lawyer, as well as a person who has immigration issues. I mean, it's a challenging year. So we'd like to start first with Myrtle. If you can just give us a brief overview of the immigration law, so we kind of have an understanding and broad framework on which to discuss.
Sure, I'd be happy to. Most of us, I think, in our audience are immigrants to this country or are descendants of immigrants to this country. The United States has a really complex immigration system. It's really hard. It's very confusing. And when you think you have a handle on it, then it seems even more confusing. So there are two groups of people who come to the United States, those who come here permanently, and those are called immigrants, and those who come here for a temporary short stay. And that would be your visitor. The United States has an alphabet soup of visas. There's the B visa for visitors, the C visa for people coming in transit, the F visas for students, the H visas for different types of workers, the L visas for company transfers, M for a different type of student, O for someone who's extraordinary. It's a long list of visas. TN for people coming from Canada. So you can come in on one of those non-immigrant visas, and they allow you to come in for a temporary time. For people who are coming to the United States permanently, which I think many of our clients want to do, they either come in either family-based or employment-based. The US limits the number of people who can come in each category, unless you're coming in as what's considered to be an immediate relative for family-based immigration. And an immediate relative is someone who is a spouse of a US citizen, a minor child of a US citizen, or a parent of a US citizen. If you're not in that family-based category, you are going to be subject to numerical limitations. And what you may see is that you have to wait for a visa to come here. One of the layers of the process of coming to the United States is reviewing whether or not a visa is available to you in that category. And we have the Department of State that issues a visa bulletin each month to tell you just whether or not you can come in. So you could see that this is potentially really complex. For employment-based cases, there are also numerical limitations. And in order to come here permanently as an employee, somebody would have to petition for you, and they would have to demonstrate that they can't find a qualified US worker. That is becoming, of course, very challenging in this economic time because, with unemployment at the numbers that we're seeing, it's not going to be as easy as it has been in the past to be approved for employment-based visa. There are other categories of people who are permitted to stay here in either a temporary protected status because of a disaster or something that's happened in their home country, people who come in and apply for asylum and refugee status. So those are the numbers of different ways that you can come to the US, but ultimately it's really a very complex and limiting process, and trying to get your application to fit into whatever category applies to you is what we are here to kind of help you through.
Thank you so much, Myrtle. It is quite complex sometimes in terms of, well, it is immigration. There's so many things going on right now. And I think that the most pressing issue right now is, what is COVID-19? How is that impacting people's ability to come to the US, or US embassies have been closed? You talked about numerical limitations. How's that impacting the visas that are issued? Alan, can you speak to what COVID-19 is doing, how it's wreaking havoc in the immigration world?
Right. So I think the impact of COVID-19 on the greater world is the same thing it's had on the economy. It's basically shut things down. And since the very impact in certain countries, it sort of shut things down for China early on and for immigrants that were coming from China, but now it's sort of gone across the globe. And so when you sort of think about it, immigration already had a backlog across the board in many cases, where an application could take up to a year already to process. And then the government shut down everything except for deportations for now what has been close to 3 to 4 months. And therefore there's just a backlog of everything that's sort of there. There are very few of my clients who had already taken their fingerprints before who were granted green cards without actually having to go to an in-person interview. But all the local offices shut down in the United States, which means no processing. The service center shut down, which means no processing. That means cases were still being filed or cases were still sitting on their desk, but individuals weren't able to process it. And across the board, all the State Department functions closed down, as well as the Visa Service Center, which sort of scheduled those appointments. So the impact of COVID-19, first of all, shut down all the offices. And now that they've started to reopen, and you sort of see these local offices reopening, the problem is that there isn't going to be a grand reopen. Each office, except for the EOR, the deportation courts, is making their own ruling with deciding when and if they're able to open and start accepting public. And when they are accepting the public, they're doing it on a very limited basis, which means in any given day, at any given immigration office, if you've ever been there, they probably see hundreds of people. Now, due to spacing and the requirements of COVID-19 for social distancing, they may not be able to see that large number of people anymore, which means they won't schedule that many people, which sort of pushes the backlog further and further. So that means people who are planning to do something, planning to file an application, planning to naturalize, planning to do anything or had some concern about moving forward, it's going to take you much longer to make it through the system just because of that backlog. And that's the problem. In addition to that, COVID-19 has given the government sort of a basis, health concern, to sort of ban travel, which they've already seen do, sort of cut off travel from the world because of the clear guidance that the federal government has under a national health crisis. So basically what they've basically done is said, all our ports of entry are closed, right? Which includes Mexico and Canada, which recently extended the sort of hold for 30 more days on both ports, to sort of say, nobody comes in unless it's essential or it's something urgent or in the public interest. And so basically your answer is they shut things down. So
in terms of the shutdown, when have we heard when embassies and things like that are going to be opening up? I mean, sure. Is it? Yeah. So when you sort of think about things opening, and this is a problem, the EOR courts who are opening and closing were only making those announcements on Twitter. And as many of us know, well, my clients who are in that situation aren't on Twitter. So therefore they're not going to know to check every morning and then to know if it's open or closed on that particular day. And these are regional, so you might have to travel hours to get there. So there is no national opening. So you have to check for each individual office to see if they're open, to see if they will see you, because the national appointment system was already horrible, in which you would now have to go to UCIS.gov and sort of make an online petition to either see someone at a local office to get an appointment or for them to make some other arrangement for you by mail. Some embassies are now accepting applications for interview dates in July. That doesn't mean that they're going to be open in July. That means that's their expectation to be open in July. Each embassy has its own schematics for opening. There is no source from the State Department yet that sort of tells you on a day-to-day basis, unless you go to each individual embassy webpage exactly when they're opening or when they're closing, but you would need to go there now to sort of make those appointments and those dates.
And this is the thing that I think is really interesting and the crux of not legal advice, but things that you should take as legal advice. If you're in the United States, now is not a good time to travel, specifically if you would require a visa, because once you leave the United States, you may, in fact, if you have to go to an embassy, may not have the right to get your visa stamped in your passport, or may not be able to return in the way that you would like to. For those people who have been outside the United States, who are going out on vacation, who are visiting for COVID reasons, general, now's the time to say, I need a passport back, what's the next move? But in all cases, no one is scheduling these appointments into July, and it really doesn't tell you about the processing. While you sit at an embassy abroad interview, that information is sent back to the United States and cleared here in the United States. And it's not clear to me that all are up and working right now. So an interview a week or 2 weeks to get your passport back may take longer.
Oh, okay. Well, it's just something that we just have to continually check, because USCIS, the Department of Homeland Security, will be updating us, and people have to work with attorneys like us to keep them posted on the latest. What about the public charge rule? We've been hearing a lot about public charge and the requirements, who does it impact? What's going on with that, Sheldon? Can you comment on that? Oh, I think you're on mute. You're on mute.
Sorry. Zoom, novice. Yeah. Yeah, so the public charge rule, it's a piece of regulation that CIS has been working on for really probably the last 3 years or so. It was initially set to go into effect last fall in October. Several federal courts issued injunctions preventing it from going into effect. It actually didn't go into effect until this past February, when the Supreme Court issued a ruling. But just some background on the rule. The public charge rule it's been in the statute, or at least the statute has authorized this for a long time. Just that the government is now, USCIS is now changing how it interprets the rule and how it enforces the rule. As you may know, most of the immigration infrastructure is congressional, it's based on legislation. And Congress hasn't acted to change the immigration laws in quite a bit. There have been efforts, obviously, on many fronts to change immigration laws, but there really hasn't been comprehensive reform. What the executive branch, however, can do to, I guess you could say, incrementally change the law or the effect of immigration laws is to use regulations. And the public charge rule is probably on the latest or biggest example of the executive branch using regulations to have a significant effect on immigration. So essentially what the public charge rule is about, I guess in layman's terms, it's a way of means testing immigrants, people who are coming into the United States for green cards, whether they're applying for green cards outside the United States or they're here in the United States applying for adjustment of status. And it basically looks to, the statute authorizes the agency to look to a person's age, their health, their financial assets, their education, their skills, and make a determination, is that person likely to become dependent on the government for support? In the past, the government's interpreted the statute to say, well, look and see if the person is getting certain cash benefits from the government based on the time they spent in the United States, whether there will be a public charge. An affidavit of support has been required, meaning the person who's sponsoring you, for example, if a spouse is sponsoring you, the spouse has to submit evidence that they have enough assets to support you. And typically it hasn't been an issue up until now. What the public charge rule does, it says, well, even if you're receiving certain non-cash benefits, for example, if you're using public housing, if you're getting food stamp benefits, I guess they call them SNAP now, if you're getting nutritional assistance, those kind of things, those things, public health benefits, those things can be considered negatively against you in applying the public charge rule. Now, it's perspective. So the rule went into effect on February 24th, 2020. So looking forward, the government is looking to see, are you using these benefits after that date? However, if you had used those benefits in the past before that date, it's a totality of the circumstances analysis. So the government can look at public benefits you used before that date in determination whether you'd be dependent on the government in the future. With respect to people who are getting benefits during COVID-19, I mean, there's an exception in there for disaster relief. However, my understanding is that even if you're receiving public benefits during COVID-19, they can factor that in as well. They can use that in their determination of whether you'd be a public charge. And I guess to get back to the beginning, if you're found to be, you're likely to become dependent on the government, a public charge, you'd be considered inadmissible to the United States. So there are many grounds of inadmissibility. Crimes are probably the most common known ones. But if you're found to be inadmissible, then you don't qualify. You can't get your green card. So in a nutshell, that's
And I just wanted to make the distinction that if you already have your green card, this does not apply to you, right? This only applies to people who are applying for a green card.
correct.
Right?
Correct. People who are seeking their green card, either from outside the U.S. or already inside the U.S. I guess the exception would be there are a category of green card holders who have been outside the United States for X amount of time, and when they come back to the United States, usually it's a year or more, and they're determined to be seeking admission, right, into the United States. At that point, if you're determined to be seeking admission based on your time outside the U.S., theoretically, they can apply a public charge to you at that point. But generally, yes. So if you already had your green card, it's not something you'd be concerned with.
Right. So that's why, I've had clients concerned about the public charge rule, but they already are green card holders. So it does not apply to them generally. So in other words, if you're looking to naturalize, don't use the public charge rule as a reason not to naturalize. You can still naturalize. And Myrtle, can you speak a little bit about naturalization and requirements and why it's so important for us to naturalize even now? You're on mute.
Can I go back and ask Sheldon just a quick clarification regarding the public charge? The public charge and the affidavit of support appear to be quite similar to many of my clients. And if you have someone who is willing to complete the affidavit of support, then it's not likely that you're going to be a public charge. How does the USCIS feel about that? Or do we not know because it's so new?
Yeah, honestly, Mario, I'm thinking about that question. I'm not sure how those things interact. Historically, right, if you have a sponsor for I-864, the person's contractually obligated to be your financial support. So whereas the public charge rule is a test of self-sufficiency, the affidavit of support is a way of you saying, well, if I'm not able to take care of myself, this person, or either your primary sponsor or your joint sponsor is vouching for you financially. My understanding at this stage is that the public charge rule is in some way kind of interrupting that framework to say, well, you need to show for yourself that you're, even despite whatever your sponsor's obligation to take care of you financially, you still need to show that in the future you're unlikely to become dependent on the government.
Well, I think we're just going to have to await the litigation on that issue. I do think that there's a strong argument that if someone's willing to attest that they're going to support you, then that will show that you're not likely to be a public charge. But that actually takes us right into the issue of naturalization. After you become a permanent resident and you have been a permanent resident for either 3 or 5 years, depending on the basis of your permanent residency, you're eligible to become a US citizen. And it's really, really, really important for us to naturalize, become US citizens, and participate in this great democracy that we have joined. We are actually, I have to say that that's one area of the USCIS process that I've seen work really efficiently over the last couple of years. Cases are being processed very, very quickly. At this point with the election coming up, it's kind of too late for you to get your naturalization to vote, but it's still important for future elections. In order to be a US citizen, to file an application for naturalization, you have to be a permanent resident for at least 5 years, and you have to meet certain residency requirements. And you also, of course, have to be a person of good moral character and ensure that you don't have any disqualifying, for example, if you've committed a crime within the last 5 years, or if you haven't provided child support, you may be found to be not a person of good moral character. If you haven't paid your taxes, if you owe taxes, there are those certain issues that could disqualify you. But I strongly recommend that everyone who is eligible prepare and complete the application. Another reason you should do that, and someone else is going to talk about this a little later, is the USCIS fees are going to see a tremendous increase. I think someone else is going to talk about the issues with the potential furloughs at USCIS and the fee increase. So if you are eligible, now is a good time to start submitting your application. And our understanding is those cases are still being adjudicated. So the bottom line is, if you're married, if you got your green card through a US citizen, you'll be eligible to apply for citizenship after you've been here for 3 years and you've met the residency requirements, and you don't, you're not subject to any other bars or any other reasons why you wouldn't be eligible. And if you got your lawful permanent resident status through employment after 5 years, and you can file 90 days before your eligibility. You also have to meet certain residency requirements for the area that you live in. You have to live in the district that you're filing in at least 3 months prior to filing.
All right, thank you, Myrtle. So in terms of deportation, what's going on right now? Because everything is closed off. Nobody can be shipped anywhere. I mean, what's the issue with where are they sending people? I mean, I think deportation sometimes has impacted the Caribbean communities specifically. Carmita, maybe you could comment on what's going on in the deportation world.
Okay, there has been 2 flights to Jamaica since COVID. The first one was held up for about 3 weeks, so maybe even a month, because the government, had to negotiate with the U.S. government in terms of not having people come down who have the, the virus. They were able to come to some sort of agreement wherein the Prime Minister indicated that they were able to get a commitment from the U.S. government to use Port Augusta prison as a prison for female as a halfway house. But until then, until this whole COVID thing, is being sorted out, they have gone down, but they are immediately taken to an undisclosed location where they are quarantined. I think on both trips, my director in Jamaica told me there was at least one who had the virus. And if the person has the virus, well, they're given medical attention. But, of course, with the stigma of the deportation, as well as the stigma of COVID, where these people are being sent is really, kept on the wraps. So even though my organization would normally go to Mobile Reserve, where the chartered flight, individuals from the United States usually go, we have not been doing that for the past, couple months, because as I say, they're taken, to this hotel, someplace in Kingston, and that's where they are quarantined until, they are, after 14 days, then they are released. So deportations are taking place, not as much, because I think the last time was 20 something. The time before that was 40 something, and normally we'd have like about 60 to 70 persons going down. But what the government also said, that there was an understanding that if someone tests positive before they board the plane, then they would not send them. So I think that's what's going on as far as that is concerned. But the deportations are really happening still.
Okay, thank you so much for that. Is anyone on the panel can comment on how individuals can avoid deportation, or if they think that they may be deported, how can they get ahead of the issue so they're not in that position?
I will defer to one of the attorneys because with what I do, I'm a social worker, and what I do is I assist them when they get there. Also, if they're incarcerated, I will send them brochure and I'll send them information as to how they can prepare. But in terms of how they can avoid it,
how they could get ahead of the issue if there's some, they're out of status, or basically if they're out of status, does that mean X, they are deported? Look at their visas. I mean, I just want one of the attorneys to comment on that issue. Sheldon?
Yeah, I just want to jump in and say the first thing is, if they're out of status, if they have it, and if you currently don't have a status, then you're by definition removable from the United States. So you couldn't be deported. Does that mean you're going to be? No. If you know your status, you know you don't have lawful status, and you're concerned that you could be deported, I would suggest you get an attorney. Now, in terms of determining what the likelihood is, for one, if you're someone who has a conviction for a crime, when they have pled guilty to a crime since you've been admitted, and then you have an encounter with the law, that could put you at the top of the list, because now you have something that's considered a deportable offense, and then you're kind of back on the radar, and you can get NTA and place removal proceedings. So if you're just out of status and maybe you have no other aggravating factors, I think it would still be wise to consult with an attorney to kind of determine are there any pathways for you to get lawful status, and if there aren't, what are your other options? What's the likelihood of you being deported? If you do have aggravating factors like a criminal conviction, then I think you should definitely seek legal advice and kind of get ahead of that, because it's not going to go away just because you don't address it.
Right. So the point is, you check your status. Once you're out of status, you would be considered removable, right? So you need to, speak to an attorney, see what your options are, because there still are options. It's not, depending on your status, of course, and then depending on if you've committed an offense that makes you deportable, of course. But again, we implore people to get ahead of the issue, speak with experts in the field, so that they're not in a precarious situation where they're in deportation to begin with, right?
In an effort to get it, effort to get ahead of it, I would also say that it's really important if you get charged. This is not so much an issue as it was 10 or 15 years ago, but because many criminal attorneys are aware of immigration consequences. The fact that you didn't know there were immigration consequences to your plea is not a grounds for overturning your conviction or even stay of removal. So if you are charged with an offense, be sure to, and you're not a U.S. citizen, be sure to get immigration advice before you accept a plea.
That's a very good point. Thank you, Myrtle. We have some kind of good news, a little bit of good news with DACA, the DREAM Act. Recently, there was a Supreme Court decision. Does anybody want to comment on that?
Sure. Yeah. So I think a couple of days ago, Friday, the Supreme Court issued this decision, a 5-4 decision. It was actually a plurality decision on the equal protection issue. Basically, denying the Trump administration's effort to rescind DACA. And just for some quick background, DACA, Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, is a 2012 Obama administration program. It's directed at a population commonly known as the Dreamers, children loosely defined as people who were brought to the United States as children and are now obviously living here. The general guidelines were that you had to be under the age of 31 at the time of the program, so June of 2012. You had to have been in the United States on that day, not have any lawful status, and then there are a couple other requirements. Like, for example, you graduated high school, you went to a trade school, etc. Basically, proving that you are a productive member of society. And you met those requirements, you can qualify for DACA. The upshot of DACA was that it's not necessarily a legal status in itself, but it's a huge exercise of prosecutorial discretion, because everyone who has DACA is, as we just said, is by definition removable because they don't have legal status. But the Attorney General, Homeland Security is exercising his discretion to not deport these people. And secondly, while you're able to stay here, because you're not being deported, not being removed, you get work authorization, right? So you're able to work. So you have that benefit of being able to stay in the United States and also provide for yourself and your family. It was obviously in effect since the Obama administration. When the current administration, Trump administration, came in, they based on the logic that was, because DACA was actually challenged before in the Fifth Circuit. So the Obama administration in 2014, if you recall, tried to expand DACA and also create a new category of I guess you call it DACA. It's called DAPA, DAPA, Deferred Action for the Parents of Arrivals, basically the parents of the DACA recipients. And that was found unlawful in the Fifth Circuit, and the Supreme Court affirmed that. Well, when the Trump administration came in, then Attorney Sessions said, well, based on the Fifth Circuit's logic, Fifth Circuit found that DAPA was unlawful. And also, based on the same logic, DACA is also unlawful, because basically what Obama did was he not only did he exercise discretion not to deport these folks, but he also basically gave them legal status by giving them all these benefits, right? And on that basis, the Trump administration said this is unlawful. We're going to use the same discretion that Obama used, and just reverse it. We're going to rescind it in the same way he implemented it. We're going to rescind it. That decision was challenged in the courts. I think there were 3 different district court cases that worked their way up into the circuit courts, and then the Supreme Court granted cert and decided to review the issue. The 2 primary issues that the Supreme Court reviewed, and really the first one, the main one, was actually just procedural. So the Supreme Court says, it doesn't dispute, no one disputes that the Trump administration has the authority to rescind DACA. In the same way that Obama could implement it, the Trump administration can rescind it. But what the Supreme Court used to leave it in place, it said that the way in which the administration did it was improper. It was a challenge under the Administrative Procedure Act. And the Supreme Court said that it was arbitrary and capricious. Initially, Elaine Duke, who was the Secretary of Homeland Security at the time, had issued a memo giving her reasons why she was rescinding DACA. A few months later, Kirstjen Nielsen, I believe, was in that position. After Duke's reasons were found to be insufficient, Kirstjen Nielsen came in and she said she wasn't going to disturb the Duke memo, but actually gave additional reasons why DACA was unlawful and was going to be rescinded. Supreme Court basically said that the reasons that they gave were arbitrary and capricious. They didn't address, for example, the reliance interest that the DACA recipients had on the program. One thing I thought was interesting about the opinion, they kind of bifurcated the fact that DACA is, on the one hand, there are benefits attached to it, like work authorization, but however, there's also the exercise of discretion, right? These Secretary of Homeland Security opting not to deport these folks, and in its rescission, the Trump administration did not explain, did not give any rational basis or any real explanation as to that component, the exercise of discretion. So on that ground, on the procedural ground, Supreme Court basically struck down the rescission of DACA, which was a victory for DACA recipients. There was also an equal protection claim, a constitutional claim in there. Basically, and we've seen this claim in other cases that have gone into the courts to the administration, basically where it's saying that there was racial animus on the part of the administration. The plaintiffs cite to the numerous Trump campaign and Trump administration. Well, when I say Trump, I mean him, not the administration, but the president himself. Statements he made about certain about Latinos, about immigrants in general, and the claim is basically that the rescission of DACA was rooted in that animus, was rooted in those sentiments, and the court dismissed those claims surprisingly in short shrift, basically saying, those claims are remote in time. He made those claims; they weren't made in conjunction with this decision, the rescission of DACA. Another point the court raised is that when Trump made these statements, not the Secretary of Homeland Security, which is kind of an interesting thing for the court to say, because we know that those people, the Secretary of Homeland Security and the Attorney General, all serve at the pleasure of the president. But the equal protection claim did not get much traction with the court, but they upheld, they struck down the rescission of DACA based on failure to comply with the APA. So, and I guess in some, the administration actually can go back and fix those mistakes. They can go back and say, well, we're going to give you reasons that are not arbitrary and capricious as to why DACA should be rescinded, and kind of give a more thorough explanation of why they're rescinding it. And I guess the court would uphold that. So
right now it's still like the Trump administration can come back.
Absolutely.
Wow. So Dreamers don't have. So Dreamers need to file as soon as people who are subject to this rule need to file then, because it's always, they could come back and change it to make it not arbitrary.
And even though I think if you're a part of that first class, because I don't think DACA was ever it was never extended. So if someone is, if you fit the original guidelines, then yeah, you never applied for it, you can still apply, right? But there has been no new authorization of DACA. So it's not like if you said, oh, well, I qualified today, but I didn't qualify yesterday. But if you qualified in the original guidelines, then yes, and you never applied, you should. You definitely should.
Right. Well, what are going on? Sorry, Alan, did you want to discuss?
Yeah, so there's a question about that, Sheldon, like what's the implementation of that? Because UCIS doesn't have any procedures in place right now for filing DACA. The DACA procedures were those that were Obama, and then they were stayed until this court was decided. And so now that it's decided, the question is, are we waiting for the implementation for people to file? So I think if people should file if they can file, but don't be assured that it will automatically be accepted, because the current administration has not set up a way for processing those cases, meaning which service center, maybe even maybe linked to that. So from the immigration sort of side of things, we're sort of waiting for the service to sort of implement it. So because President Trump went back and he revoked it, the courts kept it in place in certain places, and you were able to file until it was excluded. So if you're in the class of DACA, there's 36,000 people from the Caribbean, then you should continue to renew it to make sure you have continued. If you were not in that class that had DACA at some point and you want to apply for DACA, it's a little bit more risky to file now, not knowing what the outcome of DACA may be. Because one of the considerations for everybody moving into DACA is that will the president then use that information to turn around and deport people? So my impression is from the deportation to the national side, entering the United States without work authorization is enough to be deported. So therefore, you don't need any other crime to be deportable. So if you come into contact in any area, let's see, Maryland just working with ICE. Let's say California is not working with ICE, but if you're in Chicago's not working with ICE. Atlanta might be a better example. If you're running with a cop, if you're undocumented in Atlanta, they're able to turn you over to ICE, even for a traffic violation, just not having the appropriate documentation. Or if you go to a federal building that happens to have some other services in it, and they look at your documents and they determine your documents are fraudulent, it could lead you to a place. So being undocumented in this Trump administration is key.
Thank you, Alan, for that clarification. Yes.
All right. Thank you, Alan. Thank you, Sheldon, for those comments on DACA. How about the increase in immigration fees? What's going on with that? I mean, we're hearing a lot about increases across the board on different categories, and so can you comment on that, Alan, or anyone else on the panel?
No, I can totally comment on it, and I'm sorry that I sound like I'm in a combine right now because my AC is being fixed, but I will talk loud enough so that you can hear me over the AC. Just know this breezy. It's Morehouse College behind me, so that's my backdrop, just to sort of get that spacing. The government is trying to increase fees for two reasons: to defer people from trying to apply, which has always been the goal. And the applications that are seeing the highest increase are the applicants who potentially would have the less money to sort of meet this increase. The other concern is that the government has run out of money. And the reason that they've run out of money is because they decided they were going to interview everybody, look at applications twice, return applications back that had a blank spot in the address box or some minor error that sort of runs up an additional fee. So those are all concerns that are going to impact foreign nationals. Specifically, it could cost it is costing twice as much for some applications. Some of the increases across the board are 150% for like a work authorization or such documents. The concern for that is it will take a while to implement that fee increase. So what the government can do in lieu of the fee increase is that they can furlough workers, meaning lay them off basically and stop processing applications, because then you get the same impact that people don't actually receive an immigration benefit because they're deferring the processing of the applications by making it difficult for the applications to be processed. And all that is happening in conjunction a little bit with the public charge rule, which I want to go back to for just 1 second. The public charge rule has two different functions in it. One of the function is to get immigrants that have been here for a long time in a non-immigrant function that may have used the safety net at some point, which means if you receive some kind of federal assistance in the past, it will keep you from moving forward in the process of going to the green card. So those people who are already green card holders is not really the function. The function are all those other individuals that are here who at some point will be applying to be a green card holder unless they're in a refugee status. In addition to that, it sort of impacts the Caribbean in this way. A lot of individuals who show up at an embassy to come to school here or to go somewhere here may not have an affidavit of support, or may not know how to get one, or may not have a US citizen that's able to provide one. So therefore it gives the officer the discretion to say, I don't want you to come at all because I feel as though at some point in the future, you'll be a public charge. So it gives an officer a lot of discretion to deny an application and say, I don't think you have enough money. You just have this $3,000, you're denied. And that's on every time you go to a visa interview. Someone could have been in the United States, been a student, COVID-19 happened, their parents lost their job or they lost their savings or their income. They go back to the embassy to reapply for a visa for whatever reason. They go before the officer and the officer looks at them and says, oh, wait a minute, your circumstances have changed and therefore you will not be allowed to get a visa. From the greater diaspora, when you start talking about the African countries, what it will do is take people who have a low currency value and against the American dollar and say, look, you just don't have enough money. It's nothing about your race. It's nothing about your color. You just can't come. This rule specifically impacts brown and black people around the world more than it does anyone else. And the same thing in the United States.
Wow. Wow. So is there any kind of, I mean, that's just the facts. I mean, there's nothing that we can do about that at this point.
Well, there is something that people who have US citizens need to change Congress because all of these problems that we're talking about, DACA, the increase in fees, the slow processing, can all be fixed by Congress. This recent new, which we'll talk to, and against these travel bans against African countries, all related to Congress. The end of the diversity visa, in which most immigrants from the continent come to the United States, all addressed in Congress. So it's really a push also from embassies to sort of say, look, you need to address this. I think one of the greatest challenges here is that what it does is it turns off the flow of great Caribbean students that come to the United States. There are tons of people from the Caribbean who have a better education than many in most cities because of the British system that's there. And they do quite well in college and they go on to develop themselves. But at the time they're applying to go to college here, they may not have the income and the funding to make it look like they'd make it all the way through the system. And what this does is allow some consular officer to say, no, you can't come to Harvard. No, you can't come to Yale. I believe you'll be a public charge, or you can't go to that HBCU because I believe you'll be a public charge. So it gives too much discretion to that State Department officer on each individual application.
So we need to speak to our congressmen and congresswomen. We need to speak to Congress. We need to make sure we vote. Vote in November. It's very important that we don't take it for granted, that we go out and vote and work with the groups and organizations that are, like AILA, for instance, American Immigration Lawyers Association, that is working heavily with lobbying Congress to change these rules on our behalf.
This morning that we already talked about, or they talked about this morning that I didn't hear, is the census. The census has a box now that you can check that you're Black, and then you can check exactly what type of Black you are. So you can pick whatever diaspora you're from, and it helps identify people in the United States. One of the biggest, or a large concern here is that when people start focusing on immigrants that were coming here and being successful, the #1 country with the greatest success was Nigeria. across the board. And that made people get highly concerned about the immigrants coming from Nigeria because they saw that those immigrants were coming here being doctors, being lawyers, and successful in the market, which doesn't hurt us in any way. But that's why they sort of turned the faucet off for Nigeria. One of the focuses has been turning the faucet off to Nigeria.
And what have you heard anything about the travel ban in terms of what the status is of there's, travel bans all over that are affecting different, since we're speaking about the Caribbean, we could certainly speak about the larger diaspora, the African diaspora, the Nigerian travel ban right now. What's going on?
So those travel bans before they were political are still in place because that's just what they are. They were with regards to people returning in deportation. There is a unified travel ban under 212, which basically says because of the COVID disease, we're not accepting any immigrants right now unless you are a returning U.S. citizen or married to a U.S. citizen. It's not clear about the children of U.S. citizens who are, in the process, right? There's been sort of being filed now to make sure that those classes of people who are immigrants but will be U.S. citizens at some point or U.S. green card holders because the parents are processing for them. It either means that or someone following to join because the kid was born abroad and their parents didn't spend enough time here to sort of transfer that status to them. So the answer is, right now, the Trump administration has achieved its goal of saying no immigrants. Soon, today or tomorrow, we should see the rest of the onslaught of what that means as far as immigrant processing across the board. To the Caribbean specifically, because the Caribbean, the embassies are so close and so many third country nationals go there to achieve their visa processing, should be aware that you plan to do your processing, that those processing times may improve in the future because students will be going there and everyone else will avoid going to Canada, or they may not be able to get to Mexico.
Okay, that's good to know. Anyone else want to comment on the travel ban issue? No. I guess the next issue I want to speak about would be, I guess, the stimulus rules. Myrtle, do you want to comment on that?
Pardon?
Stimulus rules?
Yeah, one more. Simone?
Yes.
Hi, Lorraine Badley.
Hi, how you doing?
How are you? Delaware. I'd like to say hello to everybody on the panel. Yeah, I did want to discuss the travel ban because there's some people. I have Jemima Chuck, who is she's from Nigeria, but she's a U.S. citizen. But Nigeria was put on the travel ban, and as if they're a terrorist nation, and so she on behalf of her, if I could get her to come through to you, she can best discuss what's going on with our country. But that is something that I discussed about a month ago with someone from Nigeria, the head of the diaspora that works with the president of Nigeria that was sent here, Abiki, and she was very concerned about that because, just like Jamaica have problems, with whether it is crime or what have you, we're not a terrorist nation. America don't have anything to fear from us doing, anything to their country or citizens. And so Nigeria was put on this list, but it's not, I'm sure there are other countries that are on this list that probably needs to be addressed, and we don't have them here, but I do have, Ms. Jemima, who has been very well, she has supported.
Lorraine, what is your question? We really want to.
My question is, what are we doing to work to get these travel ban removed? How are we lobbying for it? I mean, I'm an activist, so I can lobby. I have very good senators and who listen. And so if I need their attention on the matter, I can get it. I can get into their office. I've been to Washington and lobby a couple of times. Carmita knows because I've done it with her, and Jamaica, and having them deport people to Jamaica with dignity and those issues. So bringing it to their attention, because that's one of the fastest way we can change stuff. If you get into the Senate, if you can get into the federal government and and talk to those senators and talk to those congressmen and congresswomen so you can implement. You go with a proposal, you know, and you get them to listen. And so when they're going to have their arguments, they're arguing on behalf of you because their constituents came in. And, you know, like Chris Coons, who is an awesome man, and Senator Thomas Carper are advocates for when you come in there and with something, you know, and they will go and argue on the floor on your behalf.
So yeah,
So I am concerned about the travel ban, and I don't want Jamaica to end up on one. So, you know, but I care about my sister because I'm on the African Caribbean Commission in Delaware, which is an appointed position by the governor. And so my position is to, you know, I care about everybody. And so, you know, I bring that up as she's right here. You can see her in the pink. You know, she has a show. She would, you know, so we would like to, you know, interview you also after this, and because there are things that we want to do, and see if I can get Senator Coons, or, you know, or maybe Lisa Blood to come in and chime in and help us, because that's how we're gonna knock them down, is by reaching the correct ear. I just rushed to get here. That's why I was late coming in to pass a bill, because I didn't know that Delaware didn't have us in their constitution as protected people. And so I went to support the bill with a legislator, and I spoke, and a lot of other people spoke, and it was passed, you know. And so wow. If anybody think we can't do something, you just have to get in there. And so I am lucky to be in a state where, on behalf of the diaspora and other people who can't get in there, I use my state where I'm easy to do so, to sometimes take the argument for them. You know, that's really what I wanted to raise my hand and say, and also to say hello.
Thank you so much. Do you want to just introduce yourself formally, a little bit of your background, so we know?
Myself or Jemima?
Both.
Oh, okay. Well, I was the representative for the diaspora for Jamaica since 2013. We're now training someone else who was there, Andrew Hamilton. And I'm a party member in leadership in the Democratic Party. So I have voting power for like bringing in a senator or, you know, issues like that. I am on the Biden's campaign as one of the people picked to help select his delegates, you know, for this presidency. And I am under the NAACP, you know, because sometimes these things, sometimes you need somebody from that side to like, you know, so sometimes it all ties in. So that's kind of like, you know, all over the place. The commission takes a lot because, you know, you're dealing with so many countries, you know, in Africa and the Caribbean, and Haiti has been the one that I've touched the most, only because it was easier. I haven't even done anything for Jamaica, which is who my background is, you know. But that, you know, that doesn't matter. The point is to be there and to open up doors, you know. And so that's really what I've been doing. You know, been busy volunteering, helping to make a change. And there are things that certain people, even my senators or stuff, that they can't say that I can say it because it's not offensive. So there's a whole, you know, lot of stuff to all of this. But I am concerned about the travel ban issues, but only because when I saw that happen to Nigeria, I'm like, oh, this could be Jamaica.
I mean, it basically could be any country that they decide. And
exactly.
Then, you know, it's a presidential proclamation, and then it, you know, it goes on for a certain term. So we have to, as Alan mentioned, and as you've mentioned, work with Congress to really make sure that these things don't happen. And,
absolutely.
And more importantly, vote in November.
Yes. Yes. And I would love a list from all of you as to things, because I would love to send a list to Joe's people, Joe Biden, of things that we would like to see him put on his checkoff list for us to do. And one, I think Sheldon was saying something regarding education, and I got distracted. But you know, my email is ukjausa@gmail.com. So you all can, and then you can reach me now through maybe Myrtle, you know, and Simone, I didn't have a number for you. You know, I was trying to reach you in the week, but I got busy with this bill thing that was, you know, took a lot of my time. But thank God it passed. So Jemima, so I introduced you to Jemima Chuck,
Okay.
who's a blogger and a good friend and a friend of Jamaica. And here she is. She'll tell you about herself.
Okay, thank you, Jemima.
Hey, hi everyone. My name is Jemima Chucks. I'm super excited to be on this platform, and thank you for the opportunity. Thank you, Commissioner Lauren Badley, for pushing for me to be on here, and thank you, Dr. Claire, as well, for all that you do. I was on Dr. Claire's event over the weekend, and it was really amazing talking about what's happening Juneteenth, and Dr. Claire schooled us as a millennial about what's happening and how our mind should be reconditioned for emancipation. So my name is Jemima, and I want to talk about the travel ban. I'm a blogger. I'm a TV talk show host right here in Delaware. Just a little bit about my background. Also, I'm actually the assistant chair, the deputy chair for the African Diaspora Voice, all over the United States for the Delaware chapter. I'm also the state coordinator for African Women in Leadership organization, AWLO. It's an international organization as well. I'm so honored to be on here. Nigeria, my country, where I come from, I'm a US citizen right now, but I was born in Nigeria and I grew up here in the US and also in Nigeria. I want to talk about the ban. The ban has affected, my country so much and our people. And I believe that my people, we're very responsible people. We do not deserve to be on that travel ban list because we're not a terrorist country. If you look at the history of the United States, you can tell that, the doctors, all the doctors, a lot of the doctors, a high percentage of the doctors here in the United States are Nigerians. And you can be a witness wherever you are, all over the US. You will meet a Nigerian that's very hardworking, industrious, and we contribute so much to the economy of this country. I'm not just, a media person or all this other organization I work with representing Africa. I'm also a realtor. I'm a licensed realtor here in Delaware. As I'm talking to you, I'm just coming from an appointment, selling properties. So this is me as a 32-year-old African girl in the United States, giving my whole sweat and blood to building the economy of the US. I do not think that as a millennial that my children or people to come or my age mates should be on this travel ban list. I think that we do not deserve to be on that list. And I just want to submit to everyone here, for us to work together. It's not just about Nigeria. It's all about, other, countries all over the world that are on this list. I think America is greater than this. America is better than this. And I believe that if we put our hands together, if we work together just through this organization, through this platform, we can achieve all these great things for our children, for the future. So I want to thank you for putting this together, and you are giving me hope just listening to every one of you talk. It's kind of, as a millennial, it's giving me hope. It's just making me understand that yes, we can do this. We have a great future together, like Dr. Claire said. Yes, absolutely.
Thank you, Lorraine. Thank you, Jemima. You're exactly right in terms of we have to remain optimistic. We're resilient people. We're from the African diaspora, whether it's the Caribbean or Africa, and working together, we have power. And in terms of working with organizations to lobby Congress, to make sure that these types of things we push back on and fight back, because like you said, we are all the fabric of this country. We make up this country, and some of the rules seem to be unjustly targeted at us when we, for instance, are not the issues that they say. For instance, Nigeria, as you say, very educated people now are on a terrorist list. So we can't do anything about that right now, but we could certainly lobby Congress and hopefully use our vote to make change, meaningful change. I'd like to move to, I think I was going to ask Myrtle to comment on the stimulus rules and how that, because I think she's had some clients that are asking when they get a stimulus check, is it okay to keep the stimulus check? Can you comment on that?
Sure. As a result of COVID-19, one of the things that Congress did pretty quickly for Congress was to move to provide some sort of funding for families and citizens in need. Like many things in this administration, it didn't seem as thought out as it possibly could be. And there were some unintended and some intended consequences. It was not their intention that anyone who is not a US citizen or permanent resident get a stimulus check. However, because the way it was set up, it was available to anyone who met certain income requirements, who had filed a tax return. And so there are many individuals who are not US citizens or permanent residents, for example, H-1B holders or other kind of people who have employment authorization and are lawfully present in the US, who received the stimulus check and were quite concerned, as this came right on the heels of the new public charge rules. A lot of confusion whether or not this would be considered funding that would make them ineligible later on because they were likely to become a public charge. I've advised my clients that the stimulus check is only available to people who met the requirements because they filed a tax return. So I think it would be very, very unlikely that you could be seen as being likely to become a public charge because you received this. Furthermore, there are other exceptions in immigration law for disasters. And I think this pandemic certainly rises to one of those occasions. One of the other things that we saw, though, was that families who filed their tax returns, and the families included family members who were US citizens and undocumented individuals who likely used an ITIN number, those families were ineligible for the stimulus checks. And it'll be even all the eligible people didn't receive it as yet. So we're not sure if there's anything that can be done. And more than likely, these families are not going to be challenging unless they have the support of a major organization. These immigrant families tend to just accept whatever they get. But it certainly would not be fair if you have a person who's a US citizen, children who are US citizens who are otherwise eligible. They should be able to get the benefit just because one person is undocumented, which is the way the current rule is. So if you are from what's considered a mixed family, and in this case, a mixed family is one where there's a family member on your tax return who is undocumented, you would not be eligible for this stimulus check under the CARES Act.
All right. Myrtle, we can't hear you. You left. Huh.
Really?
Okay, there you are. Okay, now.
Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much for that. I heard something recently that there may be a presidential proclamation, another presidential proclamation that's coming out from Trump. So has anybody heard that? I heard a little birdie told me that there's something else yet again that's going to impact immigration. Alan, did you hear something?
Yes. So there will be a proclamation in a couple of hours. No one's sure exactly what it's going to be, but it's going to address, the first proclamation addressed green cards for the most part, and the COVID-19 addressed shutting the embassies. This is going to address all of the non-immigrant work visas to sort of coincide with the large unemployment numbers in the United States, where he's supposed to freeze H-1Bs, Js, Ls, and there'll be new regs on H-1Bs and change of the rules of asylum. And so that's all allowed from the president. So in some ways, if Congress were to redo immigration, a comprehensive bill, that will fix some of the problems that we discussed, even Nigeria. But a lot of the issues are on the desk of the president, are within his discretion, that have already been addressed through the Supreme Court, through the numerous cases that sort of became the travel ban case at the Supreme Court 2 years ago. So the president already has the lay of the land with regards to making different travel bans. So as long as the Trump administration is in that space, he will have the discretion to make the things to decide which countries discretion. Now, the health concern that more he's concerned about the HIV and under health in the United States. So for sort of practice arena, think about process, what that's going to mean.
Alan, we're having a little bit of trouble hearing. Can everyone hear Alan clearly? Yeah, it's kind of We're hearing every other word. I don't know why. Hopefully we'll get that fixed.
I'll get that fixed. This is my end, so give me just a second. There's just a
Sure.
bit there.
Thank you, Alan. While Alan is trying to get that fixed, I'd like to know if anyone would wants to comment on what happens if what happened to the presidential proclamations if Trump is out of office. Is that all? Does that mean all of the presidential proclamations are now dead? Myrtle?
Well, the new president would either have to rescind them or issue a new presidential proclamation. And this sort of takes us back to part of the conversation that we keep having, how important it is to participate in the democratic process, and not just at the presidential level. Immigration is actually a congressional issue. I mean, there have been a lot of cases through the Supreme Court, which has given this president a lot of leeway in making decisions, but Congress can and is authorized to set our immigration law. So it's really important that we use or vote in members of Congress who are going to actually do their job.
And that's to underscore a point that it's really Congress that is in charge of setting immigration law, not the president. So the president could issue presidential proclamations, but it's really up to Congress, which is why it's so important for us to get involved and to lobby Congress. Alan, I see that you're back.
Sorry, their failure to do so for so many years has created a void where you get like DACA, which is an executive order, something that we really, really liked, but was an executive order and was clearly in response to the failure of Congress to act. Because it is an executive order, had the Trump administration followed the proper administrative procedures, you could have seen it rescinded. And they've promised that they're going to rescind it, that, you know, the Supreme Court has provided them with the blueprint for what they're supposed to do, and they've indicated that they're going to do it. I'm not sure if they can do it in 4 months. So again, it's important that we get out there and vote.
Right.
I think I'm
Alan's back.
Okay, Alan, we can hear you.
Is it better? Hopefully.
Yes, it's
Yes.
better. Thank you.
Okay, so 2 things. One, unfortunately, I'm gonna have to, because I'm in the legal weeds with this a little bit. DACA was not a president executive order. DACA was a memorandum from the Homeland Security, which was Janet Napolitano at the time, implementing stuff from the administration. So what the president is saying, President Obama did, he didn't do. And what the president is using to fix something is something that he didn't have to do, which is the primary concern right now that people are looking at of saying, he's not going to do another executive order after DACA. He's just going to administratively change it. One of the ways to do that is to basically just stop processing the case, right? To not fund the processing of the applications at all. I'm going to turn my volume down a little bit. To not process the process of the applications at all. And so that's just a squirrely way of sort of working on a lot of different applications, is to just slow down the processing, because you can do that now, because you can say there's not enough money, I don't have enough workers, and there's a healthcare concern. So he wouldn't have to really do anything else to that DACA class to let them sit there long enough to see if he's reelected in November. If he's reelected in November, everybody who's in a DACA class should be very concerned. Everyone who's undocumented should be very concerned, because regardless if there's the money or not the money, he's going to try to make it so that he can arrest you and prevent you from using the process in the future. That's the primary concern of that. This afternoon, what the president's going to do is he's going to finish what he started the week before, which was just about green cards. Today, this afternoon, he's going to speak about all those other working visas, the H-1Bs, everything that Maryland addressed you to before, H-1Bs, H-2Bs, Ls, Js, with limited exception to healthcare workers, some agricultural workers. He's going to prevent those individuals from coming to the United States. What that's going to mean for individuals who are currently out of the States is unclear at this point. So I think that everyone this afternoon, if you hear your visa category, is a good time to check with an immigration attorney. It's very difficult for the president to end a visa status if someone's currently in the United States. So if someone's currently working at a company, or someone who recently won the visa lottery, I don't know if he can delay that perhaps. It's difficult under just judicial rules for him to say your visa is canceled. You would have to give them some amount of time to actually vacate the United States or a reason on a case by case to end that status. But if you're outside of the United States, which is the primary thing that we started with, if you have a visa and you're here now is not a good time to travel for whatever reason outside the United States. If you're required to come into contact with the State Department, or if you're just required to come back in contact with immigration because you may not be allowed back in under those circumstances. For example, if you're from the Caribbean and you decide that you want to go to Spain or to Switzerland or somewhere that has a high COVID-19 number, and then you decide to come back in and they see that you have COVID, they potentially can deny you, right? Either at the airport when they take your temperature or some other level from coming back to the United States. And all those things are not clear. And since there is no clear process, what you have will be a lot of officials making decisions on a case-by-case analysis, which is not good for me or my clients when someone is making a determination at an airport or CBP. Because once someone is denied entry to the United States, it's very difficult for me as a lawyer to sort of get them back into the United States.
So just to clarify, this potentially will impact people who are filing for a visa. Now, say that they're in the US, they want to extend their status, right? They don't need a visa. They're just looking to extend their H-1B status, their L-1 status, their E-2. They can stay in the US and still be processed and get approved by the US Citizenship and Immigration Service, USCIS, right?
Here's the quirky
It's
part.
only the issue of getting their visa at the embassy.
No. So there should be new H-1B regs that will also accompany this afternoon that will change the way you process an extension of a visa. So it's difficult for them to make regs go into immediate effect, but they have the unemployment numbers and they have COVID-19 that may make it do that. But most likely they'll have a 30-day window to say in 30 days, if you file an extension, there may be a test of the market, there may be an additional fee. What I've heard before was that they were going to start charging an additional $20,000 for each H-1B application going forward, which would be a deterrent of someone extending someone's underlying H-1B visa. And if someone is ending their H-1B term with a company, the company is required under regulations to give that person a flight home. So you can see the very real weird consequences that we're in right now, or even some companies that might have shut down because of COVID-19 and furloughed or loaded people off, their H status might already be in question. So there's a lot of things right now that are going to be very lawyerly and going to be case by case specific. After we see what the president decides to do this afternoon, and let's be honest, after we decide what Stephen Miller has promulgated this afternoon to associate, then we'll be able to give directions on where that is. And the places to get that would be from Simone's office, from my office, from Meryl's office, from Sheldon's office. USCIS is not going to give you legal information about that, or the American Lawyer Immigration or the Immigration Council, but you need to make sure you have a valid source because the embassies might not even know about it, right? The embassies might know after us what's going on and what the processing will be.
But just to clarify, individuals file for a visa to enter the US. Now, if we have our status, for instance, if we have an L status, if we have an O status, an E status in the US, we are not looking to get a visa. So I'm saying if you're not leaving the United States, you don't need, your visa could expire, but you could still be in lawful status.
You can still be in, so the question with regards to these regulations is not about, sure, you will be able to finish the term on your O or your L. The issue is those visas are given in allotments of a year, 2 years, or 3 years. And let's say you're at the end and you're looking to do your extension next year and you just haven't filed it yet because it's not time. Well, if there are new regulations with regards to those extensions, then that will change the way you do your visa processing. If you haven't noticed across the board, for H-1B visas for people who have been here, who are now doing extension, there is a 40% chance that your visa will be denied on the extension for a visa that was already approved for you in the past for the very same job. Wow. So that's part of the problem, that anytime you come in contact with the adjudication of an application, you give the government a chance to say no. And that's what these new regs are supposed to do, is to sort of fix that gap. And on one end, you have the president saying the economy is going to rebound. And on the other end, you have the president saying immigrants are taking your jobs, right? And so that's part of what the problem is here. And one of the big plays in this, and since we're all people of color or Black on this call, is that they're going to play Blacks against foreign nationals, and they're going to play Blacks against Caribbeans. They're going to make that sort of conversation that this person's taking your job, when in effect, as we've discussed recently, there is no way, if you have not been to medical school, that a Nigerian doctor is taking your job.
Right, exactly. Wow, there's lots going on. I thank you guys, everyone on the panel. Does anyone have any other issue or comment before I go to the questions?
I just wanted to make one comment on I know Murda was talking about the importance of voting and if you're a citizen, getting to vote. I know I've made this point in other immigration forums about people who apply for citizenship. One concern I hear, especially from our community, the Caribbean community, is that they're reluctant to apply for the U.S. citizenship because they'll have to give up their native citizenship. And I always make the point. I said, unless your country has some prohibition against having dual citizenship, that's one thing. But the U.S. Doesn't, which is I think a common misconception. United States, you can get your U.S. passport and then go back and get your Jamaican passport and have both if you want to. So that shouldn't stop you.
Okay, thank you so much. That's a very good point. In terms of even Nigeria right now, just to comment on the Nigerian travel ban, it's impacting folks who are interested in a green card. It's not impacting those who are interested in getting temporary visas, temporary work visas, or anything like that.
Until tomorrow.
Until tomorrow, until this presidential proclamation. But that being said, as Sheldon said, if you're a national of another country, there's Nigerians that have nationalities in other countries like the UK, and there are countries that offer citizenship by investment as well. So there are other options. Those who are on the call that have issues about the Nigerian travel ban, who have questions, could always contact me. William The Law is the law firm. I'm on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook,
TikTok,
other social media. So if you have any questions on the Nigeria travel ban, please feel free to contact me. All right, I'm going to go to questions right now, unless anybody else has any other comments.
I just had one more comment about naturalization. I'm encouraging everyone to go out and file and become a U.S. citizen, but know that until you take the oath, you are not a citizen. You could go through the process, especially right now where we have individuals who've applied, they've been fingerprinted, they've gone to the interview, their appointment may have even been scheduled, but because of COVID and the closure of the USCIS, they haven't taken their oath. You're not a U.S. citizen until you've taken the oath.
Thank you. That's a very important point.
Yes, I just wanted to make a comment, yes, regarding as we know, as we must have heard, there was an incident involving a deportee in Jamaica and 2 officers who were killed. And from what I understand, this was someone who was deported from Canada, but because of his involvement in criminal activity in Canada, and since he has been to Jamaica, as we call them, the involuntary return migrants, because we have been using a more politically correct term rather than deportees, they are going to be coming under extra scrutiny, which is sort of very, very unfortunate, because one of the problems in terms of reintegrating is the stigmatization of individuals who have been deported. And as I said earlier, the Prime Minister had indicated that he was going to be doing a halfway house type of situation where people could be prepared to go into the wider society. But until we, change the dialogue as far as these individuals, it's going to be so difficult. There is a young man who was deported. He was at college here. He went back to Jamaica. He went to the university. He got his degree at the University of the West Indies. And, he lives in fear that his employer will find out that he has been deported because of the stigma. And there really is something that we really need to change the dialogue of that because of the roadblocks that are there. And so when we have a situation where we do not have, these measures to assist individuals to reintegrate, and they fall through the cracks and they get involved in other activities, then, it becomes a big problem, and then everybody is sort of painted with the same brush. So, as the diasporans up here, many of us may have known someone who has been deported, and or a family member who has been deported, and it really is something that we really have to take up as a group in terms of really re-educating the population wherever these individuals go, that we need to really put things in place to really help them with that. I just wanted to, throw that out there.
Thank you so much, Kamita. Sheldon, do you have any last words other than the other one that you had?
No.
Okay. Alan, do you have any last comments? All right, Lorraine, did you have any comments?
Yes, I would just like to say that let's get that list. If I can compile a list of things that is important that the new president, because I don't expect this one to be there again. I don't think we can take 4 more years of this again. So, but Joe's people would really like a list of what it is that we need, and I have somebody who I can send that list to, and so whether it is the proper questions, whether it is on DACA, whether it is on education, whether it is, well, I mean, the travel ban from Nigeria. So I'm just going to compile a list of things and send them, to him, that these are what people are concerned about. And then also, but I think he just give us a list that I can work with, and then I'll work with the, with the managers and the party to make sure that they're seeing what it is that we are concerned about, because he's concerned about what we're concerned about. So let's, and so if there's something that I'm not thinking about that let me know so I can just send it to them one time.
Okay. Thank you so much. I'm going to go to some questions, and anyone on the floor could maybe able to answer. Somebody's asked, I got stuck in Jamaica due to COVID-19. July 6th will make it 6 months. I have a green card. What are the implications? What should I do? Because it's, she's thinking, I think she's thinking about being out of the US for longer than 6 months. Anyone want to comment on that question?
Yeah, so go ahead, Sheldon.
Alan, go ahead.
No. So,
Alan, go for it.
Yeah, so being outside of having a green card and being outside the United States at this point because of COVID-19 is not that big of a deal, as long as you had some implication that you were trying to return, and as long as you filed your taxes, you have a residence here, that you're not going to, most likely you're not going to lose your green card unless you're planning to stay longer, and you can file for a reentry permit and try to have that processed abroad, which is very difficult. So you sort of need to come back to the United States. But the question would be, they have allowed green card holders to come back. So unless you are ill, if you're ill, then you would need doctor's notes and the stuff to sort of justify the time that you've been out, which is in any case, it's always just a justification of why you were out this amount of time. If you were out because you lost your job and you're trying to resort your life, then the answer for me would be, then you need to come back long enough to get the reentry permit submitted, filed, and then come back for the fingerprinting if you need that, so that you could be out for as much as 2 years and not have a question, because not doing that always allows an officer to have a little bit of discretion about letting you back in or letting you back out.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you so much.
Another thing too is that they have been prioritizing, because of the limited number of flights going into Jamaica. They have been prioritizing in terms of who can go and come and all of that. So that would affect a person, ability to come back as well, because of the limited number of flights.
Okay, thank you. I just want to make sure to clarify that this forum is being hosted by the Institute of Caribbean Studies, and we are a nonpartisan organization. So we're not a political organization. Nobody here on none of the panelists, anyone who spoke, is part of ICS. We're giving our opinions in our personal capacity. But ICS, the organization that is hosting this, has kindly agreed to host us, and they're nonpartisan. So everybody has to, take that in consideration, that everyone is free to vote whoever they want to vote for. But, this is a nonpartisan organization. The next question that we have is, Somebody's asked, if you have a green card and you want to travel to Jamaica for a vacation, can you be prevented from returning to the US?
So I wrote privately to that person. I said, you might not be prevented, but you could be delayed. And here's some of the ways that you may be delayed. They may require you to come back in and be quarantined for 14 days on your own dollar. So if that's something that you could afford to do, to fly abroad, come back in, and then they put you in a hotel and then charge you for 14 days to sort of test you to come and go outside of that hotel. But one of the things now about international travel may be to anyone who's thinking about traveling. And I don't know if the Caribbean sort of has this impact yet, where they're saying, because even in Florida, if you were from New York and you went to Florida last week, they would ask you to quarantine yourself for 14 days before you went out to general circulation. So if you're traveling anywhere outside of the United States, if they ask you to go to Jamaica, you need to quarantine yourself there for 14 days before you go into circulation. And then when you return, if they quarantine you for 14 days, would that work for you? In addition, you've heard about the limited flight. So if there's no flight to bring you back as quickly as you would like to return, then what's the issue? So part of my question would be, if it's something essential that you have to travel for, then go for it. But I would not suggest any of my clients to travel abroad unless they are not interested in what time and how they return to the United States. Because as we've seen, the president has taken some very swift actions in sort of shutting things down. And in all cases, a US citizen is going to be allowed to come back to the United States first, period.
Right. So, but generally speaking, we can say if you're a U.S. citizen, you're probably okay. But if you're not a U.S. citizen, if you're not anything other than a U.S. citizen, there could be issues. Whether you're a green card, right. That makes total sense. We have a question, a very interesting question. The person's asked, I've been told that other countries refuse their deportees. I understand that this is a tricky thing when you owe money to the U.S. or are depending on them for funds. But why doesn't Jamaica refuse to accept deportees? Does anybody want to? I think you have to be a Jamaican citizen for them to accept you. But does anybody want to answer that, Carmita?
Well, I don't think we can try that because with the U.S. holding the big stick and demanding that, even with the return of the deportees in May, there was quite an outcry from the Jamaicans that deportees were being returned when the cruise ship, Jamaicans on the cruise ships were refused entry. And what it really boiled down to was the power that the U.S. government has over, these nations who depend on the United States. And so if you're saying that, we're not going to take our citizens back, well, there will be a price to pay. And I think that is what is used to, force individuals, even though, they say it's really very unfair. These individuals have lived all their lives practically, in a lot of cases, in these foreign countries, and then they're being forced to return. But I don't know, maybe one of the attorneys can say something regarding that as well, but that's my understanding.
No, I agree. I mean, yeah, based on what I was reading with respect to at least the first wave of returning residents, if you will, we'll drop the term deportee and say force returning residents going back to Jamaica. Was that there was the current political party on the JLP was definitely being criticized for the willingness to receive these folks. I know the U.S. government had said they tried to make some accommodations, saying we'll ensure that they're tested before. But I agree with the previous comments that I don't think there was really much leverage in terms of saying no, we're not going to receive these folks. I mean, one of the grounds that the United States even uses to implement sanctions against countries is countries who reject their citizens when the U.S. tries to deport them. And then the U.S. will turn around and say, well, fine, we're gonna revoke visas for your ambassadors, or maybe prevent the issuance of visitors visas for your citizens entirely. So there's definitely a huge downside to doing something like that for Jamaica.
Well, and it just happened yesterday for Burundi, that Burundi wasn't accepting their people back, and the United States said, okay, great, no more visas for Burundi. We shut it down. So you've seen it happen in the Caribbean, more succinct with the Dominican Republic for a while. There were a lot of Dominicans that were overstaying their visa, and they just said, okay, fine, no more visitor visas from the Dominican Republic. So that's exactly what they'll do. They'll cancel the right for someone to come and visit the United States, or cancel the visa probability of it, which will in turn make the government sort of do those policies, because it would even sort of impact some businesses and some, if tourism is part of your business, being able to come to the United States to lure people there is a big economy.
All right, thank you. The next question is, I am in the midst of filing an E2 visa. I'm about to file. Are you saying that with the presidential proclamation, that may impact my ability to file the visa? Should I just wait, or I'm literally just about to file?
Right. So first, at least for me, everything I say is not legal advice, because I don't have your specific case in front of me. They're just general guidelines. We're having a useful conversation about policies in general. For my clients who are getting ready to file, it's an individual choice, because if the embassy is not going to process them, or if they put a moratorium on them and you filed, you're going to be in the same situation you would be as if you didn't file, except for the money would have already been expressed. So that's really an individual choice. And for me, waiting past 5 o'clock this afternoon isn't that long of a time to sort of wait to get involved with, to sort of see what's going on with the different embassy, because there will be changes.
And we know it's going to affect all non-immigrant category. I mean, that's what we're hearing. Not all H-1B, L-1, E2, everything, the whole alphabet soup.
That's what we're hearing.
As Myrtle went through. Have another question is, I went for an interview and they took my passport, and then they said that they needed more information, which I provided to them. Then COVID-19 happened. They still have my passport and everything is closed. What's going to happen? I'm in the midst of getting an L1 visa. What's going to happen? They were literally about to from what you're saying is that my visa may be impacted, but they even have my passport at this point.
Sheldon, you want it, or you want me to?
No, yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So you can request your passport back, and they'll probably give you your passport back without the visa, and you'll start the interview process again and the money. Or you can wait and finish the process. If they ask for administrative processing, then your visa wasn't issued unless you received an email from the embassy saying your visa has been issued, pick up your passport at this time point. If the visa has been issued and this proclamation goes into order and you got the email saying it was approved, you should be able to still get the visa and perhaps finish your processing. But much like the regular class of people who are outside the United States, you have to wait to see how you might be impacted from this executive order, because the executive order is going to have a date certain, and everyone is doing something after that date will be impacted. Everyone before that date potentially shouldn't be impacted. So requesting your passport back at this time, if I were your attorney, would be, wouldn't do it until you were sure what the processing was going to be. But in some ways, you've already been impacted. You're already in the impact. So if you wanted to happen, I would just sort of wait and see how it rides out, because it could ride out that yours is approved and you get it and you're able to come to the United States. Whereas if you pull it back and try to reapply, it may be yours won't be approved and you won't be able to come and work in the United States. And the main thing about that is you need to have constant communication with your employer about what your situation is. So once again, they can advocate on your behalf to whomever they need to advocate to. You may be an exception if you're a healthcare worker, or if you're in something that's related to doing a COVID vaccine. So all those things are super important in a case-by-case analysis. So what you should do is talk to your attorney.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. One of the folks that asked the question, she has a follow-up question. Myrtle, you had responded to her question about the 6 months. She's now asked, is the fact that the border was closed so you cannot return in no time when the border will open, does that support your case when you are returning of being outside of the US for more than 6 months?
I think so. I agree with Alan that right now during the COVID-19 pandemic, I think that they're going to give you a lot of latitude, not putting words in your mouth, about being outside of the US for more than 6 months. I wouldn't be super concerned until we get close to the 1 year mark.
Yeah.
At that point, particularly if you're a permanent resident, once you get down to 9 months, I want you to be trying to get back here. If you're healthy enough to travel, if you're a permanent resident, you can come in. Once we get to the 9 month mark, I'm going to be pushing you to try to get on a plane, even if you have to go. Well, you can't go through another country now, but try to make it back. If you come in and then you have to leave, we can do an I-131, wait a month to do your biometrics and you can leave again. But at this point, I wouldn't be so concerned at the 6 month or 9 month mark, but I really don't want you to be out for more than 12 months.
And what happens if they are out after 12 months? Can you provide?
Well, that impacts your eligibility for naturalization, because in order to be eligible for naturalization, you have to show that you physically resided in the United States and that there hasn't been a break in your residency. And so any trip outside of the US for more than a year is definitely a break. And then that delays when you have to wait like 4 years and a day after you come back, if you've been out for more than a year, to apply for naturalization. But there's also like a rebuttable presumption if you're out between 6 and 12 months. So we don't really want to get to the 12-month mark.
Well, I was talking about the advanced parole, that, I mean, they can apply for something that explains why they're out.
Yes, they can apply for I think you're asking about a re-entry.
Yeah, re-entry permit, right.
Yeah, you can apply for a re-entry permit if you're a lawful permanent resident, and that allows you to stay out for more than 2 years. You have to be present in the US to apply, is that not so?
Right, right.
And that has I know you can apply and have it sent to the embassy, but that requires, I mean, this is COVID-19, you could try, I'd really try to get my person back here, even if it's just for a month.
I agree with you, Myrtle. Thank you.
Alan, I'm sorry, did you have some comment about that?
No, they're supposed, so allegedly, we haven't, this is a whole different world. And allegedly, all of these things supposedly have a small caveat for being able to apply for those things outside the United States, but it would be extremely difficult to do. So I would avoid having to go through that possibility. But one of the things that may make it possible to have that consideration done is if you are sick from COVID-19 and you're under the actual care of a physician or a hospice or something of that nature, where travel is just not wise, right? Because I have tons of clients who are on visa waivers, which isn't important to the Caribbean, but overstayed their visa and can't travel because they're under the care of the doctor. So the doctor says basically if you fly, you potentially will die in the flight. So, what are they going to do?
In this case, the border is closed and there's no knowing when the border is going to be open. That's the issue. So I hear you, Myrtle.
Which border is closed?
Trinidad and Tobago, the border is closed. No flights.
Oh, so you can't exit.
I can't get out. So, that's why I was listening to hear what you were saying. You said hopefully it will open before 9 months are up, because I'm just waiting to get out. Yeah? Yeah.
Or if it gets to be the 9 to 12 month mark, I would certainly consider applying at the US Embassy for a travel document.
Yeah, okay.
I think
or did you register with the embassy that you were there, and did you register to say that you were back?
No.
I would go on the website and register and say that I'm here and I'm trying to get back, just so that you're making a record that you're not abandoning your green card, because it just becomes a footprint that, whenever you go to a country, always, if you would like visiting, to register with the US Embassy so they know that you're there and that you're located there, so if they have to evacuate or do anything. But it's also a way of giving a footprint of saying, look, I'm here, I'm stuck in this situation, I'm trying to get back. And even if they just put it in, even if they just delete it, it becomes part of the record later on of a FOIA request to say, I told them, right?
So a letter from the government of Trinidad and Tobago saying our borders are closed, that doesn't help.
No, I think that would help as well. But I'm saying I would take that very same letter and reach it right over to the embassy, because it's just one more click on your thing to say, I tried it.
I've made every effort to try to return and maintain my permanent residence status.
There's no knowing when the border is going to be open. No evidence of when the border is going to be open.
Wow. Sorry, and that must, first, that's what I should have started with. Sorry for that, because I know that how disconcerting that may be as a person to not know, and to be in a situation where your effects are here. You might have gone for a week or 2 weeks, and now you're like, well, where, right? So sorry about that. And you know, one of the things, are you still working? Are you still working for an employer in the US or no?
No. Mhm.
Because I would sort of, you know, if you were in your situation and you had a company and a job, I would write the embassy basically telling them, you know, I need to return to work. This is my livelihood. I got to get out of here, and see if there would be some way to work around that.
Okay. Well, you guys have given me a lot of information. Yeah.
I'm glad that's been helpful. In terms of, I know that we talked about this briefly but we really don't know at this point when the U.S. embassies will be opened across the board. I mean, it's going to be a case by case basis, and you know, it's dependent on the pandemic, right?
Right.
Mhm.
So, I don't know what COVID is in the Caribbean right now. There's no sort of reporting on that, like per country. For me, I know that in the rural areas, it's sort of taken off, and in Miami, it's taken off, which leads me to believe there's a lot of influx. There was a lot of influx from Miami all the time to the Caribbean just because of the location. Does anyone know what the numbers are there? Because that's really going to.
There's been, I actually received a chart with a lot of different countries. And I understand Jamaica, for instance, has been going down.
Okay.
Like, they're one of the countries that have been getting closer to lower numbers. And in terms of other Caribbean countries, I don't know about the other Caribbean countries. I haven't heard much about Cuba or Trinidad. What did you say?
I can tell you about Trinidad and Tobago. We are really down. And
Okay.
part of it is all the mitigation things that have been done, including keeping the border closed. Trinidad and Tobago was one of the first countries in the Western Hemisphere to close its border. And since then, it has been closed. It has not been, yeah. Oxford University did a whole thing on the countries in the world in terms of mitigation skills, and Trinidad and Tobago was at the top of the list.
Yeah, and the fact that they're still not open their borders, because most countries have opened their borders.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So that's but unfortunately we don't have any updates regarding the U.S. embassies opening up in the near future.
Case by case, country by country. Yeah. And so you'll have to go to state.org and try to either schedule an appointment, see what the appointment dates are, or fill out the forms. And even then, if you do receive an appointment, it doesn't mean that you'll have that date, because embassies are subject to, if there's an outbreak in the embassy, they will have to close, right? Or if there's an outbreak, the procedural things that aren't clear. Embassies are currently making appointments. I do know that. And every embassy I know that's making appointments are making appointments in July, right? But once again, this afternoon, whatever the confirmation is, it may, you know, alleviate some of those concerns by saying, you know, we're not doing these visa processing.
Yeah. Well, thank you everyone for this insightful discussion. I think this was extremely informative. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of great news. We could surely just tell you about what's going on and assist you through the process. All of us are attorneys and experts that could assist you if you have any other questions. Again, in terms of getting in touch with us, what are we going to do? I know, as I said, my law firm is Williams Global Law. You could Google that, williamsgloballaw.com. All of my contact information is on my website. Myrtle, do you want to say?
Robinson Curlew and Associates, www.robinsoncurlew.com. That's Robinson's and then KIRLEW.com.
Okay.
But I think that is Claire on? There was going to be.
Come in. She's going to come in.
We could provide the information on the ICS website.
Okay, that's a good point. I think Dr. Nelson. Are
you hearing me?
Yeah, we could hear you now.
Okay, awesome. So wow, it's been a very hectic and very rich conversation. We have made some new friends. This is wonderful. So old friends have made new friends, and new friends have connected with each other. This is fantastic. One of the things I have to tell you that I'm very scared about, and that's why our health people are working frantically, pedaling furiously on issues around the future of law in this new world order with contact tracing and all the ramifications of that. We also have issues around border security in a post-COVID world, and so many things that we haven't been able to touch on because we focus more on the smaller individual issues as opposed to larger systemic issues, and how the laws around the world might change, and how we have to be much more vigilant as a people in looking out on how the technologies which are making us feel very good today could be used to enslave us tomorrow. So we've been having a conversation about the future of law in the last couple weeks, and hopefully we have different lawyers who work on criminal law and civil rights law paying attention to that. But I think some of it could, if we're not careful, also impact on immigration space. So just to say, I think this month has been an opportunity to really sit and reset. And I think I'm hoping that we can really continue to have a much more ongoing process. Maybe have some kind of monthly touch base, or once every other month, a bi-monthly touch base on these various issues. Now that everybody's more comfortable with the internet and we don't have to drive, go nowhere and sit down nowhere, we're being forced into doing things virtually. So that's a good thing for those of us who have always wanted to, like, we go where touch a feel that people want to see with one another, we want to hug up and we want, eat some food and a refreshment. That's been part of our socialization. So we've had to change, and I think it's very important that we continue to use this methodology to continue to stay abreast. So this has been a very exciting start to our 1 week of Caribbean American Legislative Week. I do hope that I will be getting from each and all of you any specific considerations per the law that affects us that we need to put in our document or a white paper, especially if it affects trades in goods and services. I'm not sure if you're able to get to the question about visas for those people who travel to entertain, or entertainers or musicians or artists. We certainly would love that, because that's a very important piece we could put in the trades in goods and services, or business people who are coming up to export stuff. That's important. Finally, I just want to invite everybody to share the word. We have tomorrow, we're looking at diplomacy and then security. On Wednesday, we're doing health and education. On Thursday, we're doing energy and prosperity, which is broken down into everything from trade in goods and services to correspondent banking to a whole bunch of stuff. So really would like it to just share the word. Our website is celebratejune.org. CelebrateJune.org is our website. And of course, if you need any more information, please feel free to reach out to us by email as well, icsdcorg.gmail. Otherwise, just follow us on Facebook. But if you can't send out the flyers, or if you have not in our mailing list, please join our mailing list so you can keep abreast of what we're doing. And thank you to our very competent moderator, Simone Williams Esquire. And ICS is old, she's not old, Myrtle is not old, she's younger than me. and ICS is a long-time supporter. Myrtle Roberts has been a long-time friend of ours, I mean, for umpteen years, over 10, 15 years, coming down to the hill for us many times, run up and down. So we're glad that Sheldon also is able to join us, and nice to meet you, Mr. Allen Orr. And I think Carmita also came to Washington a long time ago. So many old friends are on here. Just nice for us to catch up, and looking forward to working with you much more closely. Guys, we got to stay on top of this thing, because we see how things are. If we don't look out for us, we're not going to make it. So we're here to share information and continue to share information. If there's something that I haven't thought of and you need somebody to help you get the word out, please call an ICS. We're very open to doing things that we didn't think of first. As long as it's going to be useful, let us know. Some of you who work in certain places, whose names we can't call, if you need for us to have an event so you can be invited, please let us know. We'll be happy to invite you, because sometimes that's how it has to be done. So please just know we're here to ensure that our community benefits from your expertise and your knowledge and your wisdom and your willingness to serve. We are so grateful. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Bye, everybody. See
Thank you so much, everyone.
Okay,
Thank you.
bye-bye.
All right, take care.
It was
Thanks,
great.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Myrtle.
So folks on Facebook, we are wrapping up this session. We really hope you enjoy this. We're gonna have a very quick daily roundup at 6 o'clock, just to kind of run through what happened in the census. We had a great morning, and we're hoping we could bring back our moderators just to talk about the highlights of the session. We have been hoping to work with a radio station in the Caribbean region to bring that live to the region. We'll see if that works. If not, we're gonna probably be having to cut and splice and send the material down to the Caribbean region, because they do want to be kept abreast of some of the issues that we're dealing with this month as we and this week in particular, as we deal with the issues for Caribbean American Heritage Month and the legal issues that we have to deal with. I hope we have answered all your questions. I think we have. If so, you know, if you reach us on email, you didn't get your questions answered, please just stay abreast. We're going to try and do this again, perhaps in September. We give these people a break. They're going to need some rest after all the drama of the last 4 weeks. But we'll probably do another session on immigration in September when Congress gets back in session. So with that, I just want to say thank you, everybody, for paying attention. We look forward to working with you and to having you join our future events. Take care. Bye, everybody. See you at 6 o'clock. Bye.